Behind the Shades.
Speak to women who are experiencing burnout. What are some of the commonalities and how they would tackle that?
Mm. Well, for first and foremost, I have to say that the society and post-COVID, we're coming along in that there's a new era, an era of a resignation in which people kind of have decided to wake up a little bit and to approach their life in a different way. Burnout is more common now than it ever has been. So there's a level of disenchantment that's happening in the corporate America that the human resource industry definitely knows that they need to be able to identify those people that are bordering on burnout and providing them in diagnosing it appropriately to provide them with additional tools and resources so that they don't lose them as employees. So that's where, the shift is starting to happen within burnout. And I have to say, Terrain, I think the thing that I really want to hold space for is that there are many different definitions of burnout. And what I really want to focus on are the three different components of the clinical aspects of burnout. So essentially, you can literally be burnout to where you're exhausted, you're feeling cynicism, and you're not demonstrating professional efficacy. So we know that emotional burnout just essentially, excuse me, essentially is the physical exhaustion that comes overwhelming tiredness and the inability to focus and the lethargy and sometimes the depression that comes with that physical exhaustion. The second component, the cynicism, is when perhaps there is a lack of trust that an employee no longer has in the corporation. So they become a little bit cynical about their job descriptions or their responsibilities. And if an HR manager is good and they can see that that's, an area of weakness for a person, then perhaps they can help boost their morale. And then thirdly is the professional efficacy. And Terrain, you and I have been within the working industry long enough to know that we are experts within our industry. It's whether or not that we feel as though we have the right to step into our power and to be able to deliver our skills in a way that they are well received. So those three different definitions when it comes to physical exhaustion, cynicism, and professional efficacy are the three different components of the clinical definition of burnout. So you can score highly in one area and then low in other areas, or you can be high across the board, depending upon where you are and what's happening for you in present time.
So my understanding is that based on the three areas, if you score high in one, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to experience burnout. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. That is correct.
Okay. But if you score, is it medium to high in two or more areas? That's where there's an area of concern.
Yeah, I think that they should be watched closely.
Monitored. And the reason, absolutely. And the reason why I asked that is because when you mentioned the second point where they've lost trust and things of that nature in the company, I'm looking at the last couple of years where people didn't know what was going to happen because the world was changing before their eyes in ways that many of us weren't used to. So if we take that into effect, and then we have the third one, which is now a little bit more so on themselves and their performance suffer as a result, could that in turn mean that they're going to experience burnout, even though maybe it wasn't something that happened within, it's because of external factors?
I think that somebody that is demonstrating a high level of professional efficacy, I think that they are engaged. I mean, they are applying their skills in a way that they feel are going to benefit a higher group of people. Like there's some purpose behind it. And so you can have a high level of the professional efficacy and still that drives you to continue to work towards your goals and your professionalism. So that helps. So that's an area where if you're high, that's favorable. So, but if you're emotionally exhausted and you're not like in alignment with the professional efficacy, chances are they're going to have a hard time reeling you in and getting you to trust in your environment and to trust in your corporation. So 3 different components.
That's where I'm a little, and I feel bad for those who maybe will experience burnout, because I've been around people and you can see, at least from my observation, right? You can see the changes in the person, because you can see them, maybe they're becoming disengaged. Maybe they're just so worried about things that they weren't worried about in the past. And it's understandable because you probably deal with them all the time. Life is always changing. Mm-hmm. And human beings are, we're finicky when it comes to that. It's like, oh my goodness, like what's going to happen? Inflation's through the roof. Is my company going to cut back? Am I going to be okay? Things of that nature. So if you're someone who wants to help, let's say, for example, me, if I want to help coach someone through this, or maybe mentor them in a way, what is something that I can do to maybe help them realize that, hey, there's something that needs to be addressed. Let's do it potentially together.
Mm-hmm. I believe that the first thing that I would do is just to acknowledge where the other person is. Just be a good listener, and so that you can finally hear what is going on for them. Listen for the triggers, what's happening for them behaviorally, what's happening for them, what emotional signs are they demonstrating, what kind of different behavioral signs. So the more you listen, the more you can kind of identify where their challenges or where their struggles may be. And then if you're listening to somebody who's sharing their burnout story and you're still not clear as to where they're struggling, then you'll be able to ask the right questions. And so by asking the right question just provides food for thought, for people to stop, reflect, and to think about what their answers are to really identify what they're struggling with. That's, as you asked me what you could do as somebody who is trying to support another person. When I try to support, I take a very integrative approach. Meaning I take a 3-prong approach where I'm looking at the person and I want to identify what's happening as far as their stress hormones within their physical body. I believe that our body has a matrix that we can measure when it comes to functional blood chemistry analysis. And sometimes when we see some of these hormones that are associated with the adrenal glands, whether it be epinephrine, norepinephrine, DHEA, adrenal production, if these are out of whack, then I can see clearly that the human body could use some chemical balancing in order to support them in burnout. That's just one component. Then the second component that I utilize is positive psychology. So I try to hold the space for, just like you do. You do this so naturally, Terrain. It's not even, this is your strength, in that you allow the space for the person to process whatever trauma or challenges that they have undergone. And you ask the right question to prompt them to restory, to have a different outcome, so that they're perhaps not victimized as the result of what hardship that they may be undergoing. Positive psychology essentially has been around for years to help people find and identify their various different elements of well-being, and they train people to know what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, so that they can then in turn help heal themselves and find more happiness, joy, and positive emotions within their lives. So I think that positive psychology offers a lot of good tools for those people who are trying to re-identify and get to know themselves. So those are various different tools you can use as well. The third tool that I utilize in my integrative approach is just energy medicine. So I'm looking to hold space for another person to ground down and to really understand, do some internal self-reflection, do some meditation, do some body awareness exercises, so that they can start to identify physically where they're holding their stress in order to be able to release it out into the world, so that so the energy is not contained.